Hello and welcome to the exclusive discussion on future-proofing banks, outlook and opportunities for the Indian banks in 2025. Actually, in last couple of years, 2024, 2025, 2020, 2030, these frames have become really, really important because 2020 banking, 2024, the $5 trillion economy challenge, and now we are talking about the 2030, $10 trillion economy challenge. So many things are happening. But more importantly, what will drive the growth of the economy and the country specifically is what is going to happen to the banks. How are banks going to prepare themselves? And that is what we are going to discuss in today's special discussion on future proofing banks. My name is Amol Dethe. I'm the editor of etbfsi.com, a dedicated news portal by the Economic Times which covers banking and financial news in a detailed and different formats. We being the digital media, in fact, a digital news portal, we believe in curating news in different formats apart from just articles and videos. And this discussion is also one of such effort where we are going to share ideas, perspective, vision in a different format. So welcome each and everyone our today's panel discussion exclusively on future proofing banks. In today's virtual discussion on future proofing banks, I have with me a top four speakers from the sector. Allow me to introduce you. My first speaker is Ms. Shalini Warrier, Executive Director, Federal Bank. Ma'am, welcome on the show.
Hi, everybody. And Amol, thank you very much for the welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have my next speaker, Deepak Sharma, the President and Chief Digital Officer, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Deepak, welcome on the show.
Yeah, hi. Great to be here, Amol.
My next speaker is Mr. Samir Shetty, Head Digital Banking, Axis Bank. Samir, welcome on the show.
Thanks, Amol, and thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here.
And my last speaker is Mr. Riddhi Dutta, Regional Head, ASEAN and India, Backbase. Riddhi, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Amol. Thanks for having me. Look forward to this discussion.
Fantastic. So to begin with, every bank, every financial institution has adopted enough digital. So in fact, we are not talking about the digital adoption, but we are talking more about what is the future of the digital adoption that we have done. What is the sustainability and, what to do next. So considering, these dialogues I have framed, few questions, and Shalini ma'am, I will start with you. My first question to you, ma'am, specifically is, how can Indian banks attain agility as the consumer demands get more personalized? And it could come up, from different channels, given the fact that there are challenges with respect to core system information. So how do you think that the consumer Indian banks are preparing themselves in this particular world?
Very good question to start off with, Amol. And once again, it's a pleasure to be here. So I think this notion that, agility cannot be achieved because of legacy systems, etc., is outdated in my view. That notion should no longer be in anybody's mind, and I'm sure my fellow panelists may agree with me. The fact remains that today's consumer, from a banking perspective, is expecting the same agility from a bank as he would expect from, let's say, Amazon or a Flipkart. I mean, that's what he's experiencing, right? And that's where he is playing in the e-commerce space. So he thinks banks should also be that way. And it's our responsibility, therefore, to find ways and means to achieve that, keeping in mind, obviously, the regulatory requirements, the security constraints, etc. So I think there are 3 or 4 things that our banks are doing. And, Federal Bank, and I'm sure Deepak and Samir will also confirm that their banks are also working. So this, blaming the legacy systems is outdated, as I said. I don't think we can any longer do that. We can't take that as a defense any longer. So the stuff that we are doing, first is, I think over the last few years, we've moved into the use of middleware extensively. So, whatever your legacy system is, we've now got to a stage where we have enough middleware that can do a lot of plug and play. And riding off that middleware, we've started now working on, and the last couple of years have seen a lot of advances in building APIs. So everything becomes a service. So irrespective of what you want from the front end, you can work on the front end individually and independently of the core banking system. So APIs, as we speak today, we've got about 100 APIs already there. So as a practical example, if you want to look at NEFT as a service, it's an API, so anybody can call it, and therefore you can do the front end the way you want to do it. All you need is to connect into that API. So the use of middleware is one key ingredient towards greater agility, and therefore the ability to react faster to customer requirements. A good example again on NEFT was, and we had virtually all banks had about 3 or 4 months to move from normal NEFT timelines to 24/7. And I don't think most banks experienced any issues with the seamless transformation because NEFT as a service was being used. So the middleware is one key ingredient towards that. The second is this whole data warehouse, data lake, etc. So we're no longer dependent on the core banking system for real-time online analysis of data. Banks like us, as well as others, have evolved to the use of data warehouses, data lakes, etc., where all the information about the customer is stored, and you can literally play around with it, build models around it, decide what you want to do from a plug and play perspective, decide what you want to experiment with, challenger A, challenger B, do all those experiments. So the core banking is kind of there at the background, but it's the data warehouse that is driving the customer behavior for us. The third is particularly true for countries for India, and I think we have to credit NPCI for this, is this increasing focus on interoperability. So therefore, with the increasing focus on interoperability, banks are perforce getting their agenda up, getting their capabilities up to keep pace with interoperability. And that has made sure that adequate agility from a customer standpoint, UPI being the prime example of it. And I think, there's lots of literature written on it. So coming kind of, in terms of a synopsis to your question, really, it is that the notion of core banking system, etc., has to be set aside. Banks like us have to become more agile, and we use ingredients like the middleware, the data warehouse, the capability of interoperability that organizations like NPCI are providing to give the agility. At the end of the day, the customer is expecting, like I said, the banks to be like an Uber or a Zomato or a Amazon or a Flipkart, the same experience he wants. And we have to deliver that experience and expectation using these capabilities.
Very, very interesting. In fact, thank you so much for setting a tone with a very, very meaningful thoughts. Yes, middleware, open API are very, very important topics. In fact, I will specifically talk about data a little later when I, go to the fellow panelists first. Deepak, I will come to you. And when everybody is talking not about the banking, but the mobile banking or the smartphone banking, and we have been, talking about and we have witnessed 8/11. Obviously, it's 2020, and you must be perhaps working on 2020 or 2025 now after 8/11. My question to you is specifically about the mobile adoption. So my question is, as mobile adoption keeps on increasing as a preferred choice for the customers, what are the key elements banks need to aim, or revisit while rolling out a mobile first service?
I think that's a good question because we are already seeing the second wave of the mobile strategy. I think the first wave started way back in 2012-13 when we moved towards the 3G and the mobile apps. And obviously, after we all went live with mobile apps, we kept working on enhancing functionality or security or trying to make the app more richer, focus on UI, UX, etc. Question today, as we look at it, is where does the future of mobility takes us from the banking per se? Because today, as we speak, I think there are so many devices and operating systems. And then again, on top of it, each of those, some of those are not just pure play Android, but they have built the versions of Android operating system, which does not give you the same kind of, the protocol and how do you look at the safety, security, access. Or recently, for example, as we launched the whole video-based KYC, and we realized that the technology that is used for video KYC, that's the WebRTC technology, that was developed long back by Google, but that was built largely on the Chrome platform. But today, you have so many mobile browsers that do not support the WebRTC as a technology. So I think we are increasingly getting into a stage where mobile is not just one form factor. Within mobile itself, you have different browsers, different devices, different operating systems, and then again, different maturity curves of customers depending on where they are. And it's not just the app is what is called as a mobile today. So if you're accessing banking through a WhatsApp using your mobile is as much an offshoot of how you provide banking through mobile. Or if we provide banking through a smart speaker, which is on an Alexa or a Google Assistant, that again is the interface can be mobile, but it's not just an app as a medium. And I think we are all going back on the drawing board to say how the future looks like. I think today there's no debate that India is not just the mobile first country, it's the mobile only country. And it will increasingly be the only way majority of the Indians will connect with their bank. Also, as we look at this, we see that apart from the device, the language is increasingly going to become a very important way in which consumers will like to connect and express themselves. That means also most of the apps that we see around us were all built either native, largely in banking case. They were built with English as the primary mode, and they were built largely keeping the text-based user interface, starting the journey typically after you sign up for a banking relationship. That means you onboard in the offline world, and then you start your digital journey largely in the online world. Now we are seeing, with thanks to video KYC and Aadhaar and e-sign and the whole stack that supports the client onboarding, the experience is going to be nearly seamless as you would in any other platform, from discovery to onboarding to transacting, and then managing your entire life cycle within that small screen. That means you don't need a contact center. You don't need a branch. You can pretty much do everything out of that 4x5 screen. And as we start looking at that, I think the whole user interface is going through a big shift. When I say user interface, I think app is not the only way to build a mobile experience. A lot of that is going to be, and it's already started to happen, is the conversation first. That means if I want something to be done using the AI, using the backend, like Shalini also explained, the middleware and the microservice layer, we are able to render the experience in different form factors depending on how customer would like to interact. It's all hitting the same core system, but the way the user experience is rendered is going to be different. A chat-based or a voice-based or a vernacular or a multilingual-based or the current app-based. The second shift we are going to see is banks are increasingly moving from building everything of their own to moving towards ecosystem. That also means that we will start integrating many more use cases of non-financial nature into the banking ecosystem. In wave one, we already saw banks bringing in e-commerce as a category, say in banking app. For example, we launched an Ola or a IRCTC or a Flipkart into our app. But that was for a retail consumer segment. Today, SMEs are looking at probably a very different experience, or probably an institution or a trust is looking at a different experience. And I think each one of them wants something which banks cannot manufacture of their own. But it needs to ride on the banking APIs, which can be a payment API or a recon API or a refund or a loan, which is a pre-approved loan. And I think increasingly banks are bringing in those partnerships, and mobile will become the way where, using these APIs and authentication services, non-banking products and journeys will get integrated with banking APIs. And these will be developed by multiple partners, but will be rendered by the bank. That means banks will become the trusted source of integrating and aggregating various services and offering it to the customer. I think the third thing I would say largely will become big is on the fraud, risk, and security. Because as we move largely towards the mobile, it also has a lot of vulnerabilities. For example, the customers today, when they download and use various malicious apps, or the apps today which have a huge data privacy and security risk, how banks will ensure that when their apps are running on the same device, which is either a compromised device or an infected device, they do not let the banking application or security suffer because of some compromise at customer end. And we'll start to increasingly see a lot more on cloud security, privacy as another third focus. While there are many more, but I would say largely the banking apps will become more of a lifestyle, everyday app, catering to different customer segments and personalized for each customer. It's like a Netflix where it doesn't show me the same screen as it would show each one of us. So as we learn what we like, who we are, what we prefer to do, the apps are going to be highly personalized for each of the customer segments.
Very insightful, Deepak. Yes, Shalini ma'am, I think has
I think,
something yes, to
Deepak's
add.
covered very well all the items that are required. There is one point that he mentioned in brief, and it's a challenge which I think all of us recognize, and the myriad devices and operating systems that are out there, which, from a customer standpoint, he expects any update to the app, anything to work seamlessly across all of them. And invariably, you see there's that last 5% where either he's put in another operating system or there is some quirk in his mobile which is causing issues. So I think banks are becoming increasingly conscious of the fact that even that last 3 to 1% cannot afford to have a suboptimal experience when an update is done to an app or a new app is launched. And therefore, in a mobile first culture, it becomes important for banks like us to make sure that they're testing for that last piece of thing. So the whole notion that, it's all right, it's 2% out there, maybe it may not work, we'll course correct later, is no longer a luxury we can afford. So at least, I'm sure other banks are doing this. We also insist that everything is tested extensively on, automated testings like the Amazon Device Farm or the
Right.
P-Cloudy or whatever. And you test till that last bit. And then, I'm not saying even then you get it perfect, but the culture of mobile first involves all the stuff that Deepak mentioned, and he did mention this in briefing, but I just thought it's something we need to highlight that, and that's only going to get more complex in the years to
True.
come with, people having different kinds of devices and different kinds of operating systems out there.
Very well said, ma'am. In fact, I remember in my last conversation when we were talking about UI, UX, and consumer experience, you said that today the bank customers want a Swiggy-like an experience, Amazon-like an experience. That was a very interesting point that you had shared. It just stuck to me. I will bring Samir you here, and I would like you to talk about the opportunities that you see specifically into the mobility, sector, because everything is going on mobile. Banks are more on the mobile than the branches today. What are the opportunities that you see in that factor? Because at one side we have many challenges, like Deepak mentioned about the language, the UI, UX. But how do you look at Axis Bank the opportunities of mobility?
So thanks, Amol. So, the first thing I'll say is that, and Deepak mentioned, which is India is clearly a mobile first and very likely a mobile only country as well. And that opens up a set of opportunities for banks, right? And I think if you look at the evolution of mobility in the banking ecosystem, it started by saying, how do I move transactions? So today, as an example, for most banks and including ours, more than 80% of our transactions happen digitally. And a very large proportion of those are on the mobile app. That was the first phase. The second phase is where we started to put in products on the mobile app. So as an example, today approximately 70% of our fixed deposits are done digitally, and again the vast majority are done on the mobile app. About 60% in the last 3 months of our new mutual fund sales have happened digitally. About 50%, between 40 and 50% of our personal loans and our cards are sold fully digitally. And again, most of this is on the mobile app, right? So there's a second wave of, I would say, product sales, which is right now in process, and I think it will take, let's say, another couple of years for that journey to complete as well across various types of products. The third one, which I would say somewhere in between, is the services. So, if you want to, as an example, order a checkbook, or you to do your re-KYC, or, you want to change your address, as an example, you have to typically go to a branch. And now, the question is, can you do it on your mobile? Again, a large percentage of these happen on the mobile app, but there is far more that we can do here. So if you think of it, and Deepak framed it quite beautifully, where he said that the mobile app is like a branch, if you think of it.
Yes.
You have customers who are customers of a particular branch, and already actually a large number of customers are the customers of the branch called the app or the mobile device, right? And that number will only increase. And the question is, how can we ensure that everything that the person can do out of a branch can do out of the app itself, which is not an easy journey, but banks have made good progress around it, and there is more that we can do. So that, I would say, is
Right.
one area of opportunity. The second area of opportunity which came up again is the partnerships, which is, see, nobody kind of wakes up in the morning and says, I will do today I go open a savings account, or I'll nobody kind of wakes up in the morning excited to take a personal loan or whatever else, right? But people do wake up in the morning and say, today I want to buy a car, and today I want to whatever else, I want to book a vacation, right? The act of taking a loan is something that aids the customer in buying the car or taking the vacation. But today, these are very different customer journeys. So to book a vacation or to buy a car, he goes to a dealer, or he goes to a travel agent, and then he goes to the bank to take a loan. Even in the mobile world, these are two different journeys. He'll have to come to my app to take a loan, go to some travel app to do. The next area of opportunity for financial services in general is that how do we get integrated into these customer journeys?
Right.
So if you're booking a flight, can I, while you are booking a flight, offer you a loan so that you don't need to come to my right? And I do it on the partners platform itself. Or if you're buying a car, can I kind of do it in a way that it's all integrated and comes packaged along with the core customer journey itself. And this is, I think, the next wave of evolution that has already started, but we have a long way to go before we can call it a success. And all of this obviously will be aided by mobile and mobility, because all customer journeys are anyway moving to mobile devices.
Very well said, Samir. In fact, detailed remarks, very, very interesting. Riddhi, I will bring you here, and as Samir, spoke about the integrated platforms and integration is important. What I remember is, long back when insurance companies started operating in the country, the first thing they started offering to the bank is, if you go to a bank, along with your deposit, along with your service, insurance will be also served there. Now after like a decade, we have moved on to a different level where you're taking a loan, and there are so many other things that you can take along with it, a loan or something. That's what, in fact, Samir mentioned, that if you're booking a ticket, can you take a loan immediately? Something like this. So when I specifically talk about the integrated, integration, what are your views on digital banking platforms? Because that is one of the important area which the banks are, talking about and partnering with many platforms. Are they delivering the omni-channel strategy for banks today?
Good question, Amol, and I think some really interesting insights from Shalini, Samir, and Deepak. And I'll take some analogies from what they spoke about. I think Deepak made a very interesting point about the ecosystem, and that's something that's often quite ignored. We did a study along with IDC earlier this year, and when we did that, we realized that in the broader Asia region, 80% of banks are still looking to control the value chain themselves. And that is a potential, pitfall that they are digging for themselves, right? And if you're looking at rather opening up your ecosystem and sort of integrating with more and more, I might not call them as fintech, but a lot of different enablers. So, and that's where I think what Samir was talking about, right? You are trying to get a loan, but then when you are in the process of getting a loan, you end up looking at so many other things which are getting pushed to you as offers or as contextual marketing that the bank is pushing. Now, what is enabling all of this? I mean, these are all very interesting things, and a lot of banks are moving in that journey. But this entire customer journey, starting from again, as Deepak mentioned, onboarding of customers to servicing customers to selling more and more to customers, can be orchestrated on platforms, right? Unfortunately, if I look at in India itself, there are few banks who have started a movement in that direction, where they do understand that this entire orchestration of not only the experience, but the underlying engagement, which is driving that experience, needs to happen through a platform. You cannot really keep that in individual silos, right? We have been talking about mobile first and mobile only, which I completely agree to, and that's the trend that even I'm seeing. But while talking about a mobile-only approach, we should not forget that a mobile also needs a platform to be able to orchestrate that experience. Deepak gave a very interesting example, and I'll take it back as an insight for me and our organization. Is we talk about Alexa and Google Home and all of that. Now, again, the front end for that could be a mobile, but somewhere that interaction needs to get orchestrated by a platform, right? So we do understand that platform banking is the way forward, but the real question is, can this platform banking be made human-centric? Right. And again, Samir mentioned in terms of people waking up and saying, "Do I need a personal loan?" No, that's not the question that people would have when they wake up. But yes, they would wake up and say, I need to buy a car or I need to buy a house. And a natural follow-up from that is, yes, I need a loan, right? But can the platforms be human-centric, where we are trying to solve simple, problems of people that they have? I want to spend money, I want to save money, I want to, grow my money, right? Rather than saying, as a bank, here you come, I'm giving you a fixed deposit of 8% interest rate, or I'm giving you a personal loan of 12% interest rate. So rather than that, if we can move into a human-centric platform approach where we are trying to solve people's problem, I think we will all be in a journey towards that omni-channel strategy. Now, omni-channel itself is a very broad term, right? There could be multiple connotations of what omni-channel is. Now, you can look at omni-channel as a consistent look and feel. Probably yes, but according to me, that's probably just 30 or 40% of what omni-channel is. You can also think about omni-channel as carrying context or having context between multiple channels. Right. Yes, probably that also is omni-channel. But a broader omni-channel strategy is when you're looking at not only a consistent experience, you're talking about a contextual experience. You're also talking about having the same platform orchestrate the complete customer life cycle and the complete customer journey. That is true omni-channel, right? And that's a journey. Nobody will go there in one single day, but a platform banking and a platform play is the way forward to reach that ultimate mission.
Quite interesting. Riddhi, Shalini ma'am, I will, come back to you again. And, you mentioned about data. Obviously, partly we discussed that data that is going to be one of the important factors when we define the banking in 2025, 2030. I mean, everybody says that data will play the major role. In fact, I was speaking to, and I was in fact listening to the DBS CEO from Singapore, and he said, I'm not hiring bankers, but I am hiring the psychiatrists and engineers in my bank now, because they will work on the data and they will give me the picture. On basis of that, perhaps I will make my decisions. So, ma'am, all the banks have enough data. My question to you is, when you're heading towards and preparing your outlook for 2025, 2030, what kind of changes are you going to make in data? How are you going to read the data? So make your digital strategy, brilliant around it.
I think, I'm sure everybody has heard it by now multiple times. Data is the new oil of the future. Data is the way of the future, etc. And there goes without saying that data is the most critical aspect that we work on, and all of us have to work on. I think the way we look at it is data for the sake of data is not really what we are looking at. So how do we as an organization, and how does each person in the organization evolve beyond data into, converting it into information, and then more importantly into insights? So that's really what we're driving towards, and that involves a lot of work actually. One is a set of experts who can do it. The data scientists, as I think the DBS CEO was referring, you can hire a lot of data scientists who sit in one corner and kind of churn out all this data. That's a part of the problem actually. It doesn't address the entire problem. The real way we can evolve as an organization into using data more intelligently, using data more, realistically from a customer standpoint, is when a very large part of the organization understands the data and is able to use that information and analytics in a very refined manner. So what we really, to meet these changing demands of the customers and to kind of give more personalized experiences to the customers, there are two sets of activities that we as a bank are doing. One set of it is the investment in the analytics itself, whether it's in the form of data warehouses, data lakes, etc., and the people who run it. That's one set of it. Two is the training for the people who really have to use that data, which is the product managers, the digital banking team, etc. Use that data in a fashion which is designed to give personalized experiences to the customer. I think Deepak referred to it, what he sees on Netflix when he opens his Netflix screen should be different from what we open when I open my Netflix screen, or Amol when you open. That can only happen not by the data analytics sitting. The guy sitting at the back may do the crunch work, may do the grunt work, but unless the person who's actually managing the Netflix UI knows how to use that data in an appropriate fashion, he's not going to be able to make much success for it. So the point really is for us to evolve to a stage where the data is used in an intelligent fashion, data is used in a personalized fashion, data is used in a thing the single biggest thing in my view is not so much about the technology, but about the culture and the attitude and the training of the people that is there. And that's where we as a bank are focusing a lot more on. So in the growth agenda for the next year, year and a half, 2 years or beyond, and actually for the past few years also, what we have been doing is enabling the users of the data to evolve from data into information, into insights. That's the way we take the journey. So you have data, fair enough. That's data is as good as it is, etc. But how do you convert that into information and to insights? And with that, if all people who use the data get to that stage where they know what the insights are and how to use that insights, then I think I would consider the organization has truly evolved on the digital journey or on the data journey.
Thank you, ma'am, for that again, a very interesting dope on the data. Yes, data, I mean, there are different terms. Data is a new oil, data is a war, and everything. Deepak, I will come to you. This spoke a lot about omnichannel. Shalini ma'am also spoke about data, and everybody is talking about now. You also partly mentioned about the personalization of services, which will come from different channels, whether it's omnichannel, whether it's data, and all. My question to you, Deepak, is how can Indian banks fine tune their digital strategy to ensure mass personalization of services can be delivered irrespective of the channel?
So I think rather than saying I want to do mass personalization, it's important to see where the customer is. Okay, and so often we draw inspiration from West and we try to copy paste in India. I don't think that's what is required when we think of the Indian personalization strategy. And when I speak of personalization in Indian context, one of the things that is the most difficult but much needed is ability to talk to customer in their language. And we have not been able to do that. I think a lot of large tech players are building a vernacular stack in India. And we strongly believe that the Indian consumers, unlike probably any other market, probably needs that solution first. Because today, if you look at the data for a country like India, more than, if you leave the first 200 to 50 million consumers aside, for majority of them, English is not their primary language.
Right.
They don't understand English well.
Right.
And I think building the whole banking interface as we go digital is extremely important to understand their context, their language, connect with them in the language of their choice, which in our branches or in our contact center, we could do easily. Because there we had humans understand language. You can put call centers in different parts of the country where you can find linguistic skills. Or your branches have more of a local mix, so they could converse with customers in the language of their choice. But moment we start to build a lot of this on digital, that is the first peg of personalization in my mind. And I think we still have a long way to go before we can say that, yes, we can speak customers' language. I think the second part, which again, when we talk about banking and as we are looking at digital channels today evolve largely around transactions. So you want to place a term deposit, you want to transfer funds or place some mutual fund, whatever, you can do it and you can do it really seamlessly. Still, I think a lot of banking services which required customer to talk to someone. For example, why is there this charge on my statement? When am I going to get a reversal for probably a charge that is reflecting? Or the cash was not dispensed at the ATM. There's so many things, okay? And I think while we can all build a good, neat UI to solve these problems, customer still needs a bit of empathy. Customer needs someone to talk to, someone who can understand their pain point. And this, again, in my mind, is another facet of personalization, that I'm there with you, handhold you, understand your concern, understand the context in which you are reaching out. And these are not some bots which we program and say, sorry, we will come back to you in 2 days. That's not okay. So I think that's again a problem, which I would say is the initial peg. The third is, I think as humans and as Indian consumers, we don't love to type a lot. Okay, we all love to speak. And I think building a great voice interface for banking, we are still a long way to reach there. So if I have to pick the first three things which can personalize customer knowing where they are, who they are, what they want, understand them, it largely would start with providing a superior vernacular, a voice, and a service and engagement interface. Everything else is a lot easier. I think a lot of that we are anyway solving to show you an offer based on your eligibility or probably tell you the next best product. But believe me, that's not what customer is necessarily looking at. And I think the journey that we all need to go is from moving from transaction through digital to 360-degree banking. That means that you really never feel a need to go anywhere else. Today, can we proudly say that, yes, have we built everything through a single platform? Answer is no. And I think that's a journey where the ecosystem has to come in, because again, as I said, the linguistic skills are not just sitting with banks. Likes of Google are solving this problem. So many other startups today who are building this phonetics and the language-based skills. And I think this is where the whole ecosystem has to come together and solve. Once we do that, then I think like what Shalini mentioned, data analytics, machine learning, the end use case of data, I think all of that we will solve. And I think that are still in my mind easy problems to solve.
Very, very interesting, Deepak. And I have a very important question, and Samir, I would like you to answer that. When you're talking about the partnerships and integrating with different platforms, the major change that has happened in the banking sector in last couple of years is the fintech, the neobank. In fact, they are in fact really seamless, specifically into the UI and UX, and the innovation which they have brought. So when I see the neobanks and fintechs are catching really fast, compared to banks in many areas, whether it's SME or retail loans or something like that. In this context, Samir, how do banks need to realign their focus in opting for the right partnerships and integration with their core systems?
Let me start this by kind of going, I think, see, for each of every question in digital has to start with the consumer and not with technology or data or my product and so on and so forth, right? We have to start by seeing who's the consumer and what is the problem that we are trying to solve. So fintechs indeed are an interesting space. And there are many who have come up, many have become very successful, and I'm sure they will do very well as well. But the question on partnerships is a much broader one, which is, how do I partner with someone so that when we bring our two services together, it is not 1 + 1 = 2, but it's 1 + 1 = 4. Jointly kind of we are delivering something incrementally differentiated to the customer. And those partners could be anywhere. They could be, it could be an FMCG company, it could be a fintech, it could be some other tech player in some other sector, and so on and so forth. And I think the important thing to succeed in partnerships is the perspective of saying what customer problem are we solving and how are we solving. And I think if we take that lens, I think then a lot of this becomes simpler and easier, and the conflicts kind of vanish and so on and so forth. Is technology a challenge? Yes, it is. When you think of partnering with folks, you'll have to think of your technology architecture very differently than you would normally when you're within the bank. But is it an insurmountable problem? Not at all. In fact, all of us around the table have a bunch of partnerships that we are working on. Some of those are very deeply integrated. Some of those are lightly integrated. And we are somewhere in the journey of kind of building our tech so that these integrations happen and so on and so forth. But I think what will differentiate these partnerships is obviously tech. It's one part, but I think there are more complicated questions around, who's the customer, what problem are we solving, are we regulatorily compliant or not, how are we managing the risk, how are we managing data security and data privacy, and so on and so forth. So I would kind of think far more holistically about this than only as a technology problem. On the technology side, there are very, everybody is in some kind of evolution. Shalini spoke of having this middleware API gateways so that we can expose APIs. And these are all standard known techniques. We will all get there at some point or the other. But unless we solve this central question of what are we solving for the customer, I'm not sure we will do much on the partnership front.
Thanks for that meaningful.
If I may just comment just a couple of points on this whole partnership one, which I think all of us are working on. And Sameer covered the technical aspects are actually the easier aspects, I feel. I think the first point that, I mean, at least I do when I look out for a fintech partner is the meeting of minds. Are we really, in it for the right reason? What is it that we're going to deliver to the customer? Is it a proposition that the customer is going to be able to enjoy and work with us? So the meeting of minds is very important between us and the fintech partners. The meeting of minds is at one level, at the customer level, meaning what do we do to the customer? How do we deliver the proposition to the customer? Is it going to add value? But there's also a need to ensure that our minds meet very well on things like compliance, security, etc. Because I have come across enough instances, and I have no hesitation in saying, where we've had to walk out of partnerships because we've just not been comfortable with the kind of level of security, etc. that is there. You can handhold the partner, you can train the partner, absolutely no issues about that. But unless there's a meeting of minds, fintech partnerships will not really survive, and that's something that we hold in very strong stead when we get into a partnership.
Thanks, Shalini ma'am, for that note. Riddhi, I would like you to, talk about, you spoke about the omni-channel, bankers also reacted to it. Considering the current situation, I mean, in this pandemic situation, when we are under the lockdown, banks have more work to do. And in every bank is, in fact, accelerating and adopting different capabilities, specifically the digital capabilities that are rolling out. It is important, obviously, in these times and in coming times, to keep the light on. Do you have any specific points here, that which banks should do specifically in this particular time? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Thanks for the question, Amol. So, if I have to classify my thoughts probably into 5 different buckets, and a lot of it would be, again, going back to customers, right? The first and foremost point would be, as a bank, and I'm pretty sure, Shalini, Deepak, and Sameer would be thinking about it, is that in these age and times, how do you distinguish yourself from others, right? And this is not only relevant from a competition in terms of traditional banks, but I think, Amol, you spoke about neobanks and startup banks. I mean, against them as well. How do you distinguish yourself from them, right? There is no one way to be so-called digital first.
Right.
So that is the first question. The second question is, and I think the answer is yes, but we still need to ask this question is, are you focusing enough on the customer? I think Deepak also spoke about the vernacular, the language, knowing your customer. It's not only about responding to them fast, but also responding to them in the context of what they're asking for, right? So that digital first that we're talking about is all about the consistency of customer experience. So that is the second question. The third question, I think we spoke about personalization, but more than personalization, I believe it's more about personalization at scale, right? How do you scale your customer-centric platform or your customer-centric offering? So, the benefits of reuse, repeatability, plug and play. I think Deepak spoke about microservices also earlier. So, plug and play, the flexibility, all of this coming from a platform that would probably allow you to win the digital race, customer by customer, one at a time, right? And the fourth question is, I mean, if you have thought about distinguishing yourself, focusing on the customer, and looking at that personalization at scale, the fourth question is, how do you sustain this journey, right? So this, we're talking about platform banking, we're talking about omni-channel, but is this platform open enough to be able to bring in new capabilities together on demand without forcing banks to go back to the scratch and start from the beginning, right? So these are 4 broad questions that I think, and this is coming from my discussion with banks in the last 3 to 4 months across the region. That's one part of it. The second part, when you said banks need to keep the lights on, I think that's more transactional in the sense like us and a lot of other technology vendors that are there in the market. I think we would like to take that headache of letting banks look at just keeping the lights on, but let banks focus on the questions that I asked earlier. So maintaining the technology, maintaining the platform, maintaining the system through a managed services, all of that can be given off to technology partners, while banks really need to focus on the 4 broad areas that I spoke about. And I think as an iteration or as an iterative process, as you keep on unearthing these answers to these questions, that is where probably the banks will be able to figure out where do they stand and what do they need to do to probably stand apart from everybody else in the competition.
Very well said, Riddhi. And now I have a common question for each one of you, in fact, and that question is specifically about the outlook. So yes, we discussed many parts of the digital banking and how the new technologies and new initiatives that every bank is taking. But considering the deadline of 2025 or maybe even 2020, 2030, because every digital adoption that you have today, will give its what you can say fruits after 2 to 3 years. So considering the 2025 outline, how do you see the banking? Deepak, I will start with you. How do you see the outlook of Indian banks in 2025? What are the major changes, you see or you envisage by 2025?
Tough one, Amol. uh, I think all I can say is there are few things will remain constant, which is the premium of managing risk,
Mhm.
the credit, the balance sheet. I think these things will not change.
Correct.
Okay. What will change fundamentally,
Mhm.
I think, are two things. One is we'll see increasingly more and more new business models
Mhm.
which are built pure play digital.
Right.
That means increasingly thought afresh,
Right.
not the improvement or tinkering on our current processes, current journeys.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of such initiatives you will see coming from bank, because I know banks are strong and resilient. And whenever we talk of any threat around, there was a time when everybody was saying, "Are fintechs going to take banks' lunch?
Yeah.
What big techs will do?" Now we hear neobanks. Many more such challenges will come, because I think it's a reality that financial service is going to be always a favorite playing ground for a lot of entities, and they will like to have a slice or pie of it. Different banks will obviously follow a different strategy depending on what suits them. But irrespective of whichever path banks go with, you will start to see a lot more of a pure play digital bank or a digital play of a bank, which will be like a sub of a bank without necessarily being a subsidiary, but with a completely different DNA, design, customer promise, experience, the way it gets delivered. And a lot of learning out of such initiatives will come back and also help the core banking or the mainstream bank. So I think that fundamentally will change. The second thing, as I was mentioning earlier, I think we will start to see banks becoming more of a platform and ecosystem orchestrator
Right.
than being dumb pipes, allowing others to just process transactions through them. Because banks will increasingly see that having customers, having better understanding of risk and ability to leverage technology smartly with talent and skill, there is no reason why banks will play a game of a pie. And that also means that banks will start to distribute, provide an orchestration for a lot of non-financial service use cases. And thereby banks will become great customer service organizations digitally, rather than remaining a financial service organization. That also means that a lot of products, the way today they are connected in banks, saving account, credit cards, the form factor of those products will change. The way these products are designed, largely today around fee and charges and functionality, is fundamentally going to change. And these are going to become more of experience, solving customers' problem. And thereby the pricing model, the value that they create is how banks are going to also price their products or services. And I think this will fundamentally be a model which will align banking to customers' goal
Right.
and customers' outcome rather than banks in conflict with customer at times. And I think those who are able to move and transcend this journey well, in my mind, will be great consumer banks. Some can be great SME banks, and some can remain a large wholesale bank. But I think if we are talking of a great consumer and SME bank, most of this is what will determine the success and the relevance of those banks in 2025 or beyond.
Right, Deepak. In fact, a deep analysis. Yes, few parts will always remain like a balance sheet and all. But let's hope that the the current defaulters, which has made your balance sheet rate. Perhaps people like Vijay Mallya and all will still not be there in the 2025, and there will be a different world altogether. Shalini ma'am, the same question to you. How do you see the banking in 2025?
Sometimes wish we had a crystal ball and could look at that and kind of predict what would happen. I'm sure if you asked this question 5 years back to any of us, maybe we would have predicted some parts of it. But I think Deepak's covered a large part of what needs to be said, so I'm not going to repeat that. There's only one point that I'd like to kind of overarchingly emphasize, and this is something Federal Bank believes in, and I believe in personally, which is irrespective of all the digital, there will be a human element that will be at the core of what we give to customers. So we say, what we say in the bank is digital at the fore, human at the core. So yes, all of the digital technologies for the customer, whatever he wants, whichever way he wants to do it, duly personalized will be there. But as we speak, I still think that even 5 years from now, there will be an element of humanity that will be there. There will be an element of relationship management. There will be an element of something human that will be there. And I'm not saying necessarily to resolve a problem or anything, but just from a point of view of advice, from a point of view of education, from a point of view of learning, from a point of view of hand-holding, there will be a human element. So for me, in addition to all that Deepak said, what I would emphasize is that human element will remain there, whether it's 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And therefore, bankers are not disappearing in my view. Bankers will be there to provide that human interface. So, as an overarching theme over what Deepak said, human at the core will still remain a key ingredient in my view.
Right, Shalini ma'am. So Samir, Shalini ma'am reaffirmed that bankers are not going to vanish. They are not going to, disappear. They will be there. We also heard this, controversy of fintech will eat lunch, fintech will take over banks, and now in fact there is a global theory that big techs will have a dinner with, banks going ahead, and they will share a major pie. Considering all the situations, what is your view, Samir, in 2025 banking?
I kind of agree with both Deepak and Shalini, which is banking is a 1,000-year-old industry, right? More than 1,000-year-old industry. It's not going to change. It's not going to die in years. But I think it will look different. And I think the big differences I would say are three. First, and everybody made this point. Look, the reality today is that when in my bank, when I have a meeting on a new product, the first question we ask is what will the regulator think about this? And the second question we ask is what does the ops risk think about this? And the third question we ask is what does InfoSec think about this? And then in the last 5 minutes we ask what does the customer think about this? Yeah, this is the reality of banks today. I think this reality is going to change quite fundamentally. And I think, I don't know whether it's 5 years, 7 years, whatever, but in 5 years, 7 years, some point in the future, banks will be forced to become customer centric. And by that, I don't mean that banks will become digital, but they will solve problems of the customer. And now the customer problem solution, some customers may want to do it on the app. Some customers may want to speak to a person. Some customers may want a combination. And this distinction between digital and physical hence will vanish. Like 5 years, 7 years from now, there is a bank, and the bank also has digital, it also has physical, it also has a branch, it also has an app. All of these are coming together in a very seamless way to solve a customer's problem. So I think that's kind of, in my mind, shift number one. Shift number two is banking has traditionally been a distribution focused business. You set your distribution and kind of manage the distribution well, and the business comes. Product and product differentiation has been, I would say, a minor component of success. I see this changing as well. So increasingly in the future, the quality of your product, the quality of your experience, the quality of service, the quality of innovativeness, and all of that will become as important as distribution, because increasingly the physical distribution is becoming less relevant in terms of reaching out to the customer. So this mix between whether you're a distribution focused entity or how strong is your product design and how well are you kind of adapting to the customer needs and so on and so forth in your product design will be very different 5 years from now. The third area where I think it will be different 5 years from now is this ecosystem point that came up earlier. And I think in many places, banks will just become invisible. You won't even know that you are actually a bank is involved in the transaction. But we will still deliver the financial service to you in a very customer-centric way, in a way in which we'll delight you. So that I think is the third big change we will see in the next 5 years.
Very important thoughts, Samir, and kind of important analysis for the future, yes, I think out of three, the 2 points are really, really important. First one is obviously regulatory, and second is the customer experience. We have seen, the progressive regulations in last couple of years, the regulatory sandbox and all, and a lot of digital adoption, and obviously customer center is a very, very important approach. So let's hope there will be a lot of focus on the customer service digitally or virtually or any way it's possible. Riddhi, I will bring you here, and I would like you to take your views also. How do you see the changes in the 2025 in the banking sector?
I think it'll essentially be sort of a summary that Deepak, Shalini, and Sameer have spoken, and I'll try to summarize again in a few bullet points out here. So I think the first thing is, first point is we're talking about customer experience, right? But customer experience that will meet the expectation of the speed of execution as well as personalization via whichever channel. So the channel again could be app, could be human assisted, could be completely human based, right? So when I'm saying channel, it's not just a digital channel. So that I think is the first point. The second point is not only customer experience, but also excellence in business process that would matter to a customer at that particular point in time, right? And that is, again, drawing back to my point about having the context of what a customer is looking for. The third is about, and we like talking about personalization. And I think Shalini gave some really good insights about data and insights, but the point around personalized customer interactions built on the knowledge and insights that we have on the customers. Again, data is the new oil. I think we all agree, and that's going to be a consistent sort of a model that's going to last for the next 5 years as well. And I think the fourth point is not just the customer experience or the personalization or the data behind it, but the connected experience that would integrate channels, could be any channels, that will integrate workflows, that will integrate business process, and that will integrate a personalized content. And we personally, I as well as as an organization, Backbase, we all believe that these 3 or 4 different areas can be achieved through a proper platform play. I think Deepak mentioned that yes, is anybody there yet? No, and we also appreciate that, but it's a journey, and digital banking platforms like ours have some role to play in this personalization of services and customer experience that we're talking about.
Thank you, Riddhi, for that note, and dear speakers, thank you so much. In fact, Riddhi, Deepak, Sameer, thank you so much for sharing those meaningful insights, and thank you so much, Shalini ma'am, adding a lot of thoughts here. Thank you so much once again for sharing your perspective and excellent future analysis about the banking in 2025. Thank you so much. And dear participants, thank you so much for tuning into ETBFSI virtual session. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amol. Thank you, everybody.